Ravnica Allegiance leaks have already started, so we already have some tells as to what the rest of the set is probably going to include. I also have some ideas as to how we can maybe figure out which mechanic will be repeated, assuming that one is going to be. Let's get into it. Now here are the cards that were leaked. They're very exciting and they all seem pretty good. So I'm just going to read through them real quick. In the top left, we have Rakdos Firewheeler. For 2 black and 2 red, you get a 4/3 that reads, when it enters the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to target opponent and 2 damage to up to 1 target creature or planeswalker. This card's exciting because it tells me that we're getting the XXYY color combo cycle back. Very excited for that. The next card is the Haunt of Hightower. For a black and a black, you get a 3/3 flying lifelink. And it reads, whenever the Haunt of Hightower attacks, defending player discards a card. That's a pretty powerful ability. And then it also reads, whenever a card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, put a +1/+1 counter on the Haunt of Hightower. So that's clearly going to be a super strong card. A very fun card to play, probably in Commander as well, but a 3/3 flying legendary creature. It's a vampire. Maybe I can throw it into an EDH deck, but either way, there's a limited bomb for you. Next up is Growth Spiral. It's a Simek card for 1 green and 1 blue. It's an instant, and it says, draw a card. You may play land from your hand onto the battlefield. I'm curious to see if the Simek guild has a mechanic that revolves around putting land on the battlefield, or there's other cards that work with that synergy. But hopefully we can maybe find some other playability around this, especially in Standard. Tatiova would obviously be a big fan. Moving on, the last card in the top right is Mortify for 1, a white and a black. So Orzhov gets an instant that says destroy target creature or enchantment. It's an uncommon. This is going to be definitely a first pickable limited card. The artwork looks pretty sweet. It seems pretty strong and could definitely make the Orzhov guild potentially viable in Standard. I'll be curious to see what other cards just come in general with this set, but overall that seems like a pretty strong uncommon in limited and potentially elsewhere. And then more bottom left, this is the card that was spoiled earlier in the week, Light Up the Stage. We can see that it has Spectacle, 1 red. We don't know what Spectacle does quite yet, but then this is a sorcery. It costs, I think it's 2 and a red. And then it reads, exile the top 2 cards of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play those cards. So that's a pretty nice card. We kind of already knew what it was going to do, but all in all, excited to see how that card plays out. And then our last card is Simek Ascendancy. For a green and a blue, you get an enchantment. This is a rare. For 1, a blue and a green, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Then the next paragraph reads, whenever a +1/+1 counter is put on a creature you control, put that many growth counters onto Simek Ascendancy. And then the last paragraph says, at the beginning of your upkeep, if Simek Ascendancy has 20 or more growth counters on it, you win the game. So seems good. Yeah, there's going to be some good janky stuff with that Simek Ascendancy, which took me 12,000 times to read to realize it wasn't Ancestry, and in fact Ascendancy, because Simek is ascending to +1/+1 counter victory heaven. Alright, but how can we start to figure out what is going to be the returning guild mechanic? This is the question that I've been trying to rack my brain about and figure out, and I'm very curious if there's any, we'll say, educated approach to figuring out what mechanic may be repeated. And I think I found a way using some process of elimination to figure out what guild is going to get the new mechanic, but let me know in the comments what you think is either going to be the repeated mechanic or if I'm just completely off base. I probably wouldn't disagree with you. So if we start with the first guild that had 2 cards spoiled in that spoiler, Simek. So Simek has Graft and Evolve. Graft is where a creature enters the battlefield with X 1/1 counters on it, so it's say Graft 2, Graft 3. Those creatures are 0/0s, they come in with 2 counters, but then it also reads, whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you can move a 1/1 counter from your Graft creature to the new creature. That mechanic would work really well with Simek Ascendancy, just a thought. And then their second mechanic, Evolve. Evolve means, say I play a 1/1 that has Evolve, then I play a 2/2. Because I played a creature with a higher power or toughness, my creature with Evolve now gets a +1/+1 counter on it. So I can play a 1/1, then I can play a 1/2. My 1/1 with Evolve still evolves into a 2/2. As long as one of the numbers is higher, it evolves. Pretty simple. The next guild is Rakdos. They have 2 mechanics, Hellbent and Unleash. Hellbent does something different for each card. Think of it similar to Undergrowth in that there's no specific mechanic it does every time, but it revolves around you having no cards in hand. For example, a creature could be on the battlefield and then it will say Hellbent, if you have no cards in hand, this creature gets +2/+1. Something like that. Unleash is pretty straightforward. When you play it onto the battlefield, you may put a 1/1 counter on it. If you do, that creature can no longer block. So just lets you be really offensive. That's what Rakdos wants to do. Cool. And then Orzhov has Haunt and Extort, and I won't even get into Haunt because Mark Rosewater said that has 0 chance of coming back, so moving right along from that. Extort usually allows you to pay an additional white or black mana to do a small effect, say Life Drain. So for example, you could have a card on the battlefield that says, whenever you play a creature spell, you may extort, and then each player loses 1 life, you gain 1 life, something like that. Basically, it's like you have the power, and now you can keep extorting your opponent with your own resources. Makes sense. Next up is Grawl with Bloodthirst and Blood Rush. Those are bloody brilliant mechanic names. Bloodthirst reads, if an opponent was dealt damage this turn, this creature enters the battlefield with X 1/1 counters on it. So if it says Bloodthirst 2, it would come into the battlefield with 2 1/1 counters on it if your opponent or an opponent was dealt damage this turn. And then Blood Rush is an ability that you can typically discard a card for a cost and then give a creature a power and toughness boost. So usually you're going to use it in the situation of I'm attacking, okay great, you block, in response I'm going to Blood Rush this card in my hand where I discard 1 in a red, discard a target creature, gets +3/+3 till end of turn. Last but not least is Aureus, and their mechanics are Forecast and Detain. Forecast is an activated ability that can only be used during your upkeep once per turn, per card, for that card. Whatever, it doesn't really matter because Mark Rosewater also said this one is unlikely to be reprinted, so we'll move right on to Detain. Detain is similar to the card that is Detain in that it just stops a creature from attacking or blocking. For example, when this creature enters the battlefield, detain target non-land permanent an opponent controls. So now that that thing is detained, it's being questioned because that's Aureus' thing, the law and rules and you not doing what they don't want. You know what I mean? So between those mechanics, can we figure out which guild is going to get one repeated? And I think it's easiest to just cut off Orzhov and Aureus right now because they've already had one mechanic that has been said it's not going to be brought back. I don't think it would make sense to have basically one guild with only one repeatable mechanic for the future. That's a pretty arbitrary reason that I'm going to run with, so I'm going to say Orzhov, Aureus, not going to have a repeated mechanic. With the cards that have been leaked already, I could see Simek having the mechanic that does return. I just want something different than just the +1/+1 counters moving around. Maybe it's because playing Arena you see so many Merfolk decks that are just constantly throwing 1/1 counters around and you're getting beat down. Maybe I just want something different there, but it clearly would work with Simek Ascendancy. It would make sense and maybe help make Merfolk a bit more standard viable. I got mixed feelings on it, but I'm just going to give that arbitrary reason of don't make beginner Arena Merfolk decks more powerful to disqualify it from having a repeated mechanic. I'm looking for arbitrary reasons, and that's as good as any. So we're going to move on to the other two, which would be Rakdos and Grawl. Now, we could also kind of throw in the spoiler information that we've seen a Rakdos card already have a new mechanic. But before the spoiler even happened and I was working on this, I figured Rakdos is not going to have a repeated mechanic, similar to the Orzhov and Aureus reasons, because Hellbent, you know, it's got a prefix that people probably aren't going to be super keen on. They probably don't want to bring that one back. They probably want to bury that mechanic fairly low just because PC reasons. For that equally arbitrary reason, I'm going to say Rakdos isn't the one that gets it. So that would leave Grawl to be the one that gets the repeated mechanic. But I would probably give Simek just as good, if not a better shot of having the repeated mechanic. I don't know. Again, let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I know this is a leak. We're not in spoiler season either, but I'm already excited. I'm super excited. I really enjoyed Guilds of Ravnica's spoiler season and whatnot. It was a lot of fun. I'm super excited for spoiler season to finally start whenever that happens. We probably got a few weeks at least, but man, I'm really excited to be on Ravnica for the first time, at least for me. It seems like the tension that's building in the storyline as well is very exciting. Let the speculation begin. Let me know just your thoughts in general. Again, in the comments, I'd love to know what you think. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.